Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Elevate Your Equity podcast, where investors with a special emphasis on couples begin, continue, and deepen their journey to financial freedom together using the powerful vehicle of real estate investing to do it. Today, we have an amazing guest, Dr. Jeff Anzalone. He's a full-time practicing periodontist in Louisiana, and author and founder of the debtfreedoctor.com. That's debtfreedr.com. His focus is on helping doctors and other high-income professionals create passive income from real estate so that they can stop trading time for their money. So this was a wonderful, wonderful podcast, and it was so great to hear it from a doctor who felt stuck, felt that he needed an insurance policy, and went into real estate investing. And so I highly resonated with it. What did you think?
Yeah, this was a great show. A lot of practical tips here, from just getting yourself into a place where you're financially stable enough to start investing passively, especially if you're one of those investors who maybe doesn't have a lot of time to invest, but wants to try to build up some passive income on the side, right? This is the absolute best show for you because Dr. Jeff brings a lot of great wisdom in from years and years of doing this, and also under extreme circumstances as well, which we'll find out more in the show. All right. So with that being said, we're going to, instead of just continue to talk about it, we're just going to bring him on the show. So without further ado, here's Dr. Jeff. All right. And Jeff, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. How are you today on this fine Friday morning?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on today. Looking forward to it.
Yes, us too. Let's get going here, and let's start off with how you got into the field of real estate and real estate investing. What kind of got you excited about the field? And, we read a little bit about your history, but we want to hear it directly from you as to how this all kind of came to be.
Yeah, good question. Thinking back on it, it actually all came from a minor snow skiing accident. We love to ski, and we were at Beaver Creek one year, got off the ski lift, started down the slopes, and got behind one of those ski schools. The kids are all in line, and sometimes a wild one will break off from the group, like my kids do or used to do, and cut right in front of me. Well, in order to avoid killing him and killing myself, I swerved, and when I fell, how when you fall you naturally catch yourself with your hands. Well, I got up, and luckily it wasn't anything major, but I did have some wrist pain. And that really started the conversation in my mind, thinking, because you never think about getting sick until you're sick. You never think about being injured until you're injured. And I started thinking, well, my whole family's well-being and everything all focuses on, my hands. That provides the income. What would happen if I couldn't do that? I didn't have a clue what to do, where to start, where to go, but that was the very first thing that opened my eyes that I got to have to do something more as a sort of an insurance type policy to other streams of income instead of just one.
Wow, that's awesome. So where did that lead you after that? Because I know a lot of people would have the same type of questions, right? It's like, if something so serious happens, like what kind of logic would you follow after that? Like, how did you end up connecting the dots between understanding you need an insurance policy to going to real estate investing or helping you get some alternative income streams coming in?
I'm a big reader. I read probably 5 to 7 books a month. And probably last year, I started listening more to podcasts. I really enjoy listening to podcasts, typically when I'm on a treadmill or something like that. That's how I wound up finding you guys. So enjoy listening to your show too, for sure. But just started reading both books and reading and doing searches online to figure out what other people were doing for additional income streams, specifically people that were in my field, being a doctor. And there was a few sites out there that talked about that, doing different side hustles, mainly most at that time, and this was probably 6-7 years ago, it was all about doing different side hustles. You could do this little job, or you could work extra shifts, you could do this or that. And I didn't want to pull more time away from my family. So I wanted to keep what I was doing, but try to, if possible, actually even lower the amount of time working in the clinic, which I've been able to do, but also provide different streams of income, Not so much because we want to buy a bunch of stuff. It's, again, if something happened to me or if I want options to either retire early or do something else, I would have that. So the more that I read and educated myself, the more that I realized that the multi millionaires, the really wealthy people, over 90% of them had real estate in their portfolio. And I didn't. The only thing that I had at that time was our primary residence. So that actually started me down the road to shifting to, okay, well, I need to start learning about this real estate stuff. And then we sat down, my wife and I sat down, which I think is very important, to come up with, okay, this is where we are, this is where we want to go. What are some of our goals? And again, we didn't want to have more time away. But the only thing that we knew about real estate at that time was you had to go and physically buy property. You had to manage it. You had to be the landlord. That didn't seem very appealing at the time, but that was the only thing that I thought was out there. So I have a couple of friends in my area that their family owns a lot of property. So I went with them and really picked their brains a lot. And it was a lot of work because that was their full-time job. I wasn't too crazy about it, but we actually started looking at some single family homes. And then I went to a meeting in Dallas thinking that it was going to be about, learning more about how to manage real estate and this and that. But it really opened my eyes to all the other different ways that somebody could invest in real estate without taking out more time, without being a landlord. So once I gathered all that information, I started looking into it, which led me first to crowdfunding online. That was when it started getting real big, and then, continued from there.
Excellent. Now, thank you for sharing. So I wanted to back up a little bit more on this, and I wanted to ask you, it seems like you were kind of eventually making your way from single family homes and your early investigation to finding multifamily, right? But then, there's this whole real estate realm. You realize that all of these wealthy individuals ended up using real estate as an income vehicle for a lot of for what they do, and how they build their net worth. Can I ask you where your wife and family were on all of this conversation? Because I can tell from the way that you're talking that you're very intentional and you really like to read and you like to find new stuff out and solve problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And help fix things. So could you walk us through what that conversation looked like at home? Like how that vision set, that goal setting discussion went, and why you guys eventually came and how you guys both eventually came on the same page?
I think back at that ski trip, that really started the conversation, between us for sure, which got us to looking more into different ways for income streams. I would run different things by her. What do you think about this? She actually started doing some work for some of the different multi-level marketing companies. One of them she still does today, Monate. I don't know if you're familiar with that hair product. So she was actually, she's my hygienist, but she was actually looking for side gigs for her because she wasn't working full time. She didn't really have a whole lot of interest in the real estate so much as she does now. She's really interested in it now because she sees how much it's not only been able to change our lives, but how it's changing other people's lives. And I was talking to you before the call. She's actually at the beach right now at Destin with one of our kids, but we're in the process, our group's in the process of purchasing some vacation homes. And one of them we just purchased is like a half a mile in Destin from where she's staying. So when I called her this morning, she was actually taking a walk this morning with her friend to go look at it. And before we started learning about real estate, she never had any interest or anything like that. But it seems now that it's kind of actually made our marriage stronger because we have something else common that we can talk about. And, she talks about it to her friends and that sort of thing. So that's been real cool to see that whole way that's worked.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, you can see that she's starting to get more and more active and taking initiative on her own. That's a really cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you can tell that you're definitely aligned on the same path. That's really great. So one thing I wanted to ask, I know Sophie's got some questions too that she wants to ask, but I have to ask you this too. You're known as the debt-free doctor, right? And so one of the big things that I see is also part of your insurance policy against yourself in case something happens, or you're just looking for some sort of financial security, is being debt free. And can you talk a little bit more about how that fits in with your real estate investing and how that fits in with your general brand and how important each of those two pillars are to you?
Yeah, great question. When I originally started the website, it was actually right when I just started investing in real estate. So I didn't really have much experience. So at that time, my goal was to teach people, mainly doctors, other high income professionals that typically acquire a lot of debt, like student loan debt. Just wanted to walk people through my experience of having a job offer fall through, having to learn everything on my own, having all this debt, getting out of debt, using many of the Dave Ramsey principles at that time, and then just some basic investing advice. So that was the original plan for the website. I wanted to get the whole URL debt-free doctor, but that was already taken. So I had to get debt-free DR. But anyway, it's actually a little bit shorter. So, but again, that was the plan for the site. But as I started learning more about real estate, mainly passive real estate, and seeing how it can really help people, especially now, and I know your wife probably knows about this, how prevalent physician burnout is getting. It's really, really high. Unfortunately, I've had two friends, one a dentist in town, and one of my best childhood friends was a physician. Both took their lives a few years ago, and some of it had to do with financial issues. If we could just get the word out, the more people that can get the word out, just to show people, hey, if you're stuck in any career, you don't have to be. Life's too short. There's other options out there to get you out. So that's when I really started shifting the site now more to focused on real estate, or getting the mindset to invest in real estate, different resources, books, that sort of thing, just to open people's mind that there's a lot more out there than if you're miserable in your career. There's a lot more out there and resources that can help.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Jeff. And I'm so sorry to hear about your friends. And you're right, it's so prevalent. And the irony there is that, we're taught in our society to go to school, to get educated, to go for the high paying jobs. And yet we're not taught that it comes with certain consequences and ramifications long term. And especially like for physicians going into solo practice, there's a whole level of understanding the business side that we aren't taught in school either. And so I just wanted to ask you, understanding that you as a doctor, your time is so precious and valuable, how are you balancing this whole endeavor with real estate investing with your current really busy schedule? What advice can you give other doctors who are, like you said, stuck in burnout, probably miserable and feeling like they can't get out of what they're doing? How can they transition into being a debt-free doctor like you?
Well, to answer your first question, I've always heard, and you've probably heard too, when you find something that you're really passionate about or you love, it doesn't feel like a job. And, before all this, I was like, yeah, whatever. But it's true. I mean, I love, eat, breathe, and sleep this stuff. I love it. I research and write articles in between patients. Today is Friday. I don't see patients on Friday, so I typically will focus a lot of the time that I would be treating patients, and I'm able to get a lot of it done on Fridays. And I try to keep the majority of my weekends free, again, for family time. But I do have a pretty set schedule when I work clinically, when I work out or do school functions or sport functions for my kids, spend time with my wife, everything is blocked out as much as possible. So that's kind of how I juggle my time with that. To answer your second question, really the following those Dave Ramsey principles early on really helped me, because I think if we don't jump on it, a lot of the student loan debt, whether it's from undergraduate or medical or dental school or whatever, or law school, or whatever profession you're in, you're going to let that lifestyle creep happen. You're going to get the house, and you're going to have kids, and then you're going to need a bigger house and better cars, and you just keep putting off a lot of that consumer debt, to the point where, I'll have conversations with people in their 50s, sometimes 60s, that still have student loan debt and other debt that I'm like, man, what are you doing? They can't even afford a wedding for their kids, and just because they have so much debt. So if I can catch somebody right out of training that's used to living on beans and rice and $30,000 a year, well, I'm like, look, just keep living like that just for a few more years, and it will just be so much better for the next 50 years if you can do that.
Yeah, beautiful. Very well said. I think that Sophie and I also had that similar type of discussion early on. And it took some convincing to show that this was actually going to work, right? Because, a lot of people feel like living that debt free or slashing debt lifestyle from Dave Ramsey, that takes a lot of dedication and it takes purpose. And there has to be a reason behind it, or else it won't stick, or the other person in the relationship won't really understand why this is happening. So I think that it always starts with like the vision of what it is that's possible. And so I think that that's a really, really important thing. How would you say, would that also, has that also applied to you guys as well? Was that also part of the conversation that you had that one day on the ski slopes as well?
Yeah, for people that are actually watching this, you can see I have a whiteboard behind me, but we had a small whiteboard, started this journey getting out of debt. And basically we would list our debts. I'm a very visual person, smallest to largest. And had a bunch of different student loans. And then the last one, of course, was the mortgage. And, we could, mark it off every month. You could see that top number going down, and the more money that we were bringing in, the higher, the quicker that first number was coming down. And then it just started again. That's why it's called the debt snowball. Then we roll it over. And then you get to the point where you're really excited. And should we go out to eat tonight, or should we put the money, we were like that crazy at one point. And then once we knocked out all that debt, it was a really good feeling to have, especially paying off the house. And it's just a great feeling to have that. Some people don't want to do it. They think that they can invest the difference and still have all that. But I think that's why it's called personal finance. It's whatever personally fits you, you and your spouse's goals.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think that gamification is absolutely essential, right? Because then it's like you're competing against yourselves, and you're like, well, I think we can do this quicker, and it's just a really cool thing to see. Yeah, and Sophie and I, we've done that too. We did the envelope system. We went out and we pulled out as much cash as we were going to live for some of our expendables, that weren't like fixed expenses that went out of the bank account directly. So doing that activity is something that we're also really passionate about too, because sitting down and reviewing, what's going to happen the next month as a couple, say, okay, do we have birthdays? Do we have to plan for, Christmas now? Or do we have to plan for like, giving gifts later? And we'd have like accruals, like we would take some cash out and put it into an envelope as a separate savings account for a specific, like for gift giving or for something like that, right? So we got really sophisticated into that, but it was a really good thing for us to sit down every month to talk as a couple of where our money is going to go. So that was something in the early years that we really cherished and helped bring to the table.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, it wasn't without resistance from me. And for our audience, of course, like there's couples out there who aren't necessarily on the same page financially. And so, Jeff, how can couples like better communicate when it comes to living the Dave Ramsey lifestyle? And can you kind of share what you and your wife went through as you were going through this whole process?
Yeah, we just again sat down with our goals. We listed all of our debts. We knew that we wanted to attack that smaller debt first. So I think if everybody's on the same page, and you don't have one going to Amazon or Zappos every day and the other person going to work, so if it has to be a team effort, or it's going to be really, really rough to do. And then also on top of that, if one person, all they're doing is spending and another person is trying to get out of debt, well, think about what that effect can have on your marriage. I mean, it could have a very, very negative effect. So it's really important to have an open communication, but also have a little fun every now and then. Don't go 5 or 6 years with never going to a restaurant or going to a vacation, but maybe set little, if I could do it over again, I would have probably set some different milestones, or, hey, once we knock off X amount in debt, we're going to go to the beach or what, something like that. So again, make it fun. Don't have to be so serious, because whether you do it in 5 years or 7 years, you're still going to do it. Get rid of all that debt. So I think that's real important.
Yeah. And again, I think it comes down to being on the same page, right? And understanding what the goals are. Because for me, like I'm getting flashbacks now to when I just graduated college and I first found out about Dave Ramsey, and I was horrified by the amount of student loan debt that I had. Because up until that point, it wasn't even on my radar. I was like, I'll pay for it later. I'll make lots of money later as an engineering graduate, right? And I did make a lot of money as an engineering graduate, so I'm glad I had that. But I remember if some of my friends from the old days back in Houston, about 10 years ago when I graduated, when I was going out to dinner, I would purposefully eat rice and broccoli and beans at home before we went out to dinner. And then I would just have water. Like I just go out there for the social part of it. And so every single time we went out to dinner, I would always have water or maybe a small appetizer or something, because I only gave myself, I think it was like $200 a month for food or something. So it was pretty extreme. I don't recommend that kind of scorched earth type of thing, because when you make, when you're making 60 or $70,000 like I was back in, 10 years ago, that kind of money you can proportionally spend. You can add $100 to your budget just to open up your life and start being a little bit more abundant thinking as well. So there's that balance that you kind of have to walk.
Yeah, Jeff, just curious, was there anything crazy and extreme that you had to resort to being on this whole
Yeah,
plan?
for sure. Because two weeks before I finished my training, I had a job lined up. We had a 2-month-old, $300,000 student loan debt. We'd already purchased our home, but we were just paying interest only, because the banker that I knew, that was before the 06, 07 crash. So the only thing that you had to do back in Louisiana to buy a house is, hey, you know a guy, and, oh yeah, just sign this paper and it's yours. That was it. So when all that happened and the deal fell through, had all that. Plus, I didn't have a job now. I didn't know how to start a business. I didn't know how to run a practice, anything. So I had to resort, to answer your question, crazy things. I had to resort to going back to what I used to do in high school and college and mow yards. I was probably the most highly trained yard guy in the United States at that time. But you got to do what you got to do to pay the bills. So I did that for a couple of summers until we were able to get on our feet.
Amazing. I love the humbleness and the humility that you're willing to do whatever it took. I just think that that's so inspirational. Well, to me and
Yeah,
of
me
course
too.
to all of our listeners, that like don't let your ego get in the way of your
I have
goals,
a
right?
funny story, extreme story with my wife. She called me one day when my son he probably wasn't even 1 year old yet. And she called me frantic at work, thinking something happened or whatever. And she said, I just don't know what to do. I said, well, calm down. What's going on? She said, well, I went on a walk this morning. And when I got home, I realized that Brooks, that's one of our sons, somewhere along our 2 or 3 mile walk, spit out his pacifier. And I'm like, okay, what's the emergency? Well, we can't afford another one. And I said, it's okay. So she hung up the phone and re-walked the route, found it, and bolted it home. And that was our mindset at that time. And
Wow.
but that's where we were. But it really took a long time for me to get out of that scarcity mindset, because in school I was like you, I'm not worried about my debt. I'm gonna get out and make good money. All of this stuff happens. Then you go from, oh, everything's going to be a good abundance mindset to scarcity. Anything can be pulled out from you at any time. The 2020 pandemic brought back a lot of flashbacks for a lot of people, myself included, that, one day we're treating patients and the next day you're told, well, you can't see patients again until we tell you. For us, it was 2 months in Louisiana. So that was another eye-opening thing that, I'm writing an article right now, right before we got on this call, about it doesn't really matter what profession or what career you're in. Really, no job or career is safe. Just look what happened, last year. So that's more important to continue focusing on not just your active income, to get all these other streams coming in, building in. And it's really going to happen quicker if you get both you and your spouse on the same page.
Right. If you're both heading in the right direction, it's a lot easier to direct that energy to things that are conducive to common goals, right? So I think that's really, really important. And I can definitely tell that that's a priority for you and your family. And so thank you for living that for us and being an example there. That's really great.
Another
Now,
cool thing that all of this has helped is being able to connect with our teenagers and teach them. And my 14-year-old last year read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it was funny because he finished the book, and the first question he asked, he was dead serious. He says, Dad, how can I get to the point where I don't pay any taxes either? I'm like, well, you got to get a job first, son. But I mean, just started getting the thoughts and conversations going on in his mind. And it's really cool now. We ride by an apartment complex instead of just riding by and them just looking out the window. It's, Dad, look how many people are paying that guy rent. So it's just a different way of thinking because,
Yeah.
as you know, if for those that have kids, if you don't teach them, about finances and money and that sort of thing, then our school system is going to do it. And look what it's, doing to people. So I think it's really important to be involved with your kids as you're learning along the way too, not just your spouse.
Yeah, fantastic. How do you think, just a quick aside here before we head off into talking more about passive investments a little bit more in detail for those who are starting out, but what would you say your journey has been like for your kids, right? Going from, having that experience on the ski slope to starting to have those conversations about budgeting, and sorry, son, we can't really afford that right now, or we're not doing that right now. This isn't part of this is just not what we do. And then from going from there to starting to invest in real estate and having this side business. And what do you think that your kids are going through your kids' mind as you're going through this journey yourself? And what kind of legacy do you think you're setting up?
We just got back from a trip, Montana, and we love it out there. It was one of those all-inclusive places, very, very expensive. But then the reason why I say it's expensive is because we let our kids know. We don't tell them the exact price, but we say, look, this is something that most people can't do. And because of the different things that we invest in, we're allowed to come, places like that. They know where it comes from. We're constantly telling them, if you want this type of lifestyle, then these are the different principles and things that you need to do, unless you marry somebody rich. But this is what you need to do, so that they know. So it's not like they get out, they go to college, they get a job, and they're like, well, wait a minute, I how do you do this? We've been doing this all of our lives, and why didn't you tell me anything? So we're very open about that. My youngest son, he's very real numbers oriented, real analytical, and he's already started the conversation with me that he wants to get more involved in real estate, maybe be an accountant or something like that. So it's really cool to see where these different conversations that we have is going to lead them down the path to life.
That's fantastic. So many kids don't have these types of conversations with their parents because a lot of the parenting stigma, or at least, when I was growing up, was that you keep the finances separate. Like you don't really reveal that to your kids just because, we all grew up in an era, even me, where there's so much attachment to the net worth to your self-worth. And that's not necessarily true because there's a mindset piece that comes with that can pull you through and set both of those things. So, I think that being open and honest with your kids, at least to some degree, about what it is that you're doing financially is going to help get them exposure to it early so they have a head start. And I can definitely tell that's happening with your kids because they're asking you questions about, look at this apartment building here, look at all the people that are paying rent, and how can I not pay taxes, or how can I reduce my tax burden? And starting to think at such a young age, that's really going to leave a very strong impression on them growing
No,
up.
he said, how can we not pay taxes, not lower?
Not pay taxes. Well, I'm not sure if that's, I mean, yeah, I guess there is a way to do that, but it's a long game. But long string of 1031 exchanges for now. But yeah, but still, I think that's pretty amazing that to start asking those questions at such a young age.
For sure.
That's really great. So let's shift over here. I wanted to ask, because you are a physician and you help people create passive income. I imagine that you have quite a bit of passive investments yourself, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And so being a passive investor, you must see things and see patterns with operators or people that you like to partner with. Could you maybe speak a little bit to what it is that you look for in partnering up with someone, especially for those who are out there that are maybe in your situation where they have a full-time job, either they're working W-2 or they're 1099, or they're someone that's a professional, owns their own business, right? A self-professional. What would you say to them who are looking to get started in passive investing?
That's a really good question. And there's really no black and white answer. It's going to take a lot of time. It's taken me a lot of time and effort, trial and error. I think I told you early on, the first syndication that I invested in, every investor lost all their money. and that was a crowdfunding deal. And that's what got me from investing online to investing with people one-on-one. And I've written about that on my website. So I'm very transparent about things. And I think if you talk with people that say that they've never lost money, or they never had a deal go bad, or they've never had any problems, then run, because it's not true. That's just part of it. Failures are part of it. But the more people that I've invested with, the more you can see the pros and cons with them and compare them to the other people. You can, like at meetings or events, networking, you can talk with people that have invested with people. And I think the longer that you do this, the more those same names start coming up, like who to invest with and who not to invest with. And so I think the more that you do your research, the more people that you talk to, I tell people the number one thing for success with passive investing is finding the sponsor group that you can trust, that has the track record, because people are so focused on returns. You can put any number down. Oh yeah, we can do a 80% cash on cash return or whatever. You can finagle the numbers however you want it. But, I always tell people a good sponsor can make a bad deal good, but a bad sponsor can basically the opposite, can make a good deal bad. So that if you find somebody that knows what they're doing, then that's, the key. So that, the track record, their background. Again, you could do, I know some people that have gone so far to do background checks on people. You could listen to maybe some of their podcast interviews, and then if they give resources, check with them, look at their investment philosophy. Check with the different portfolio that they have. How many deals have gone full cycle? Because one of the people that I used to invest with, what they would tell you is going to be a 4 or 5 year hold period. Well, it was like a 7 or 9 year hold period. It just
Right.
Versus some that actually will tell you 5 years and it actually sells in 3.5. So again, looking at portfolio of past projects is the key. Again, when we're talking about spouses here, look at and come up with your risk. Are you very risk tolerant, or are you risk averse? And so, for instance, we have teenagers, and I'm a little more risk averse. So I want something that's not going to pay as much, but not as going to be risky as much. So we tend to stay away from new construction, things that don't have a track record. I want to buy something that's cash flowing, it has a proven track record. And I'm not saying that you have to do that. But again, if you're on the same page with your spouse, your risk tolerance, then you can find sponsors that have the same type of investment philosophy, that you have. You want to make sure that whenever you talk to their investors, ask about how they communicate. Are you going to be just put off from, you'll be talking to the sponsor during the initial call, then after that, you're just put off on the side to some high school kid in a cubicle that's doing their calls. What type of communication do you get? Email communication. So I think that's real important. Do they help? A lot of times I'll ask, do they help with, because physicians, high income earners, taxes is our biggest, expense. Do they openly help or assist with tax strategies, or can they connect you with people with that? So I actually have always had an accountant for my practice, but last year I added another one that mainly just focuses on the real estate. And I think that's really important, that the bigger your real estate portfolio gets, the more advisors you have, because what they're going to save you in taxes is well worth, what you're going to pay them for sure. And then the last thing I always look for is make sure that the sponsors are actually putting their own money into their project, because if they believe in the project, they should put their own money into it. So those are the different steps that I take or recommend to evaluate a sponsor.
Man, so much wisdom there. Thank you, Jeff. I can tell that you've been doing this for a long time, because those are universal practices that everyone can, it's not like tied to metrics or things, because like you said, those things can change all of the time. And so I love everything that you said. And it's all comes down to networking and building up who you know in the space. and finding someone that you trust to start, at least give yourself a launching platform, right, to move on. So thank you so much, Jeff. That's really great. Good stuff.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. So much wisdom and great advice. And so, as I'm hearing you share your story and your experiences, I'm often reminded that, real estate investing or investing in general is not a linear path. And I was just wanting to ask you, looking back with all of your experiences and success, were there any tough moments, or what was the toughest moment, if you'd like to share? And then what helped get you through those tough moments?
Yeah, the toughest moment that I mentioned earlier was losing that money, but then having to tell my wife about it. Hey, honey, how was your day? It was okay. By the way, we lost $50,000 in an investment. And I didn't invest for about a year after that. I could have quit. But again, I remembered that, the multi-millionaires, they had, 90% or more had real estate in their portfolio. So I knew that it can be done. It was being done. You can look at how whenever you fail, that's where you learn. So I learned from my mistakes. Looking back on it, I had no business investing in real estate at that time. I mean, I would look at the website, I look at the pictures, I look at the returns. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about underwriting. It was, that apartment looks pretty good, and yeah, look at those numbers, and I'm going to invest in that. That was it. So sooner or later, whether it would have been that deal or another deal, it was definitely going to catch up to me. So it's probably good that it happened early on, and which, shifted my, investing strategy to working with people that I know who they are. I know about them. I know where they live. I have their cell number. I'm very involved with them, because, that probably the biggest hurdle for people initially is, hey, I'm about to give somebody that I don't really know 50 grand or 100 grand, and just about to wire them money. And it's a scary feeling unless know who they are. So that's why I think it's really important to do your due diligence up front.
If you don't mind me asking, Jeff, what was it that actually caused the syndication or that investment to implode?
It
If you can
was,
talk about it.
yeah, it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We weren't informed that it was in an area that the crime was going up. More people were moving out than moving in. So the sponsors thought that they could put a whole lot of money into it really quick to try to get people to come back in, but they wound up running out of money, and the whole thing just folded. So again, if I would have known the sponsor, if I would have gone and looked at the property, looked at the neighborhood, and that's what I do now, because I know people are really busy and they don't have time for all that. And that's why I wanted to create my site to be a trusted resource for people, because I mean, I don't have to do it. I'm still making, good money treating patients. But as your wife's a doctor, we have this big S on our shirt for not Superman, but sucker. How many times are we pitch deals and we fall for it? And I'm trying to prevent that from happening to people. I have to put my name on the line. So I take a lot of pride in that. And my reputation is on the line. I mean, as you know, that there's nothing more important than the reputation.
Yeah.
That's stated in the Bible. It's more important than money or gold or whatever. If you're not a man or woman of your word, then what do you have?
That's right. Man, so much great advice here. I love this, Jeff. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. And we're starting to head out to the end of our show at this point. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask you some questions that we ask all of our guests, because it's kind of like what we do, kind of like the Bigger Pockets podcast, but we have our own 5 questions that we want to ask people. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. It's called our rapid round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So number 1 is, and I think I may know the answer to this one, or there's 2 answers that I think I might know that you might answer with. What book has had the biggest impact on you, and why?
I would say it's 2 books. First is the Bible, because any problem or issue that you can have, anything in life, you can find in there. And then the second one, I would say probably with most people that have gone down this road, would be Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Not so much getting specific things to do, but just opening your mind, just like it did to my 14-year-old, opening your mind out there that, hey, instead of just focusing on going to school, getting a job and working for money, you can get your money to work for you. I think that really helped a lot with my mindset.
That's awesome. Those were the two books that I thought you were going to say. And for those listeners that are out there and have listened to all the podcasts up to now at this point, and you haven't read Rich Dad Poor Dad, please, you've got to go do that. You've heard that said so many times from so many different podcast guests. You've got to get Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's such a great mind-opening book, as Jeff mentioned here.
If people wanted to emulate your success, what's the first actionable thing that they could do?
That's a good question. If they're not in the habit of reading, I would start doing that, start educating themselves. I'm an old school guy. I like physical books, but if you don't like physical books and you want to read on your phone, that's fine. But start the process of educating yourself, books, podcasts, networking with people, that sort of thing, because the more you start to take in, the more excited you become about it and the more that you learn.
Yeah, love that. Definitely compound effect there for sure. Number 3, what small thing do most people not know about you?
I would probably say that I'm more of an introvert. I would rather, be at home with my kids or wife or dog than really going out and about. So that's probably one of the things.
Yeah, I resonate with that.
Yeah.
And then next question is, how do you like to unwind and restore your creative juices?
I would say for me, it's like clockwork. As soon as I leave work every day, I hit the gym or hit the tennis court, and that really helps me clear my mind. And my wife can tell if I go from work straight home and I walk in and I start barking orders or whatever. She said, "You haven't been to the gym yet." She knows. She said, "You better leave right now. Don't come in here." So that's really helped me to stay balanced.
That's great. Thank you. Good advice. All right. And last question is, what is your guys' favorite family vacation spot to go travel?
Actually, we just got back from it a few days ago. I mentioned to you, we love the mountains. So we were in Montana, but, Colorado, Utah, anything where we can get away from the Louisiana heat and humidity during the summer. That would be mine. But I really think that my wife and kids, it's somewhere with a great beach. So they're more beach people, but we have a happy medium. I can go where I want to go and bring everybody, and then I'll go with them to the beach too.
That's fantastic. Love it. All right. Well, very, very cool. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being on the show. What we want to do now is give you a little bit of space to tell the audience more about what you do and where they can find you and how they can connect with you in general if they want to learn more about you and what you have to offer.
Yeah, they could go to my website, debtfreedr.com. I've actually put together a free passive income guide. So they can go to the homepage and click on it, or they can go to debtfreedr.com/free guide. If they have any specific questions, they can email me, Jeff, Jeff, at debtfreedr.com. Be more than happy to help them any way that I can.
Yeah, and that comes very highly recommended, obviously, to everyone out there who's in the situation that Jeff is in, or even just wants to learn more about passive investing. Jeff is clearly an expert in this space. And so, Jeff, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure having you on as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. I think you guys are doing a lot of good, especially for married couples. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much,
thank
Jeff.
you.
We really appreciate that. And for all of you out there that have listened out to the end of the podcast, we want to thank you for listening to Elevate Your Equity. And if you can, wherever you're listening to this, please like and subscribe. Doesn't matter where you're doing it. If it's on YouTube or iTunes or Spotify or wherever, please just comment and engage with us because we want to get better. And we also want to get in good favor of the algorithm gods so that we continue to move up the chain and get exposure to more people so we can all thrive together, right? And learn from each other more. So please do that. And that being said, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show. And this is Derek.
And this is Sophie.
And we are signing off. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.